Trevor, it's been 2 years since we met on social media, man.
Yep.
It is amazing getting here to Ireland, getting to see these ley lines. You got to tell me about this circle or wherever we're sitting right now. How is this a part of our consciousness, and how did we end up here?
Yeah. So this is a 3 to 5,000, maybe 7,000 year old stone circle that the Druids used for ceremonies and rituals. They would open different portals to different dimensions. They would call in energies. They would expel energies. And it would be a gathering place for different tribes to come and do rituals together. And yeah, this is ancient land.
What do these stones represent? Why are they in a circle?
I really don't know. they this would have been an enclosed energy portal that maybe they came into and set intentions. Like I said, open up different portals of reality within, maybe, and without. They had ways of manipulating matter.
You think they could move objects?
Oh yeah. Oh, these stones are, if you want to pan around and look at the stones, these stones are not light. These stones are heavy. Some of them are tons in weight. Some of them are made from sandstone. Some of them are made from limestone. The two at the entrance portal there, they're quartz. So they're white quartz. And then the trees are blackthorn and whitethorn trees, which are fairy trees. They're literally portals to another dimension.
Fairies?
Fairies.
Hold on.
Yeah.
You got to tell me about fairies, because you also talked about this fairy tree.
Yeah.
Are fairies aliens? Are they higher dimensional beings? Obviously they have gifts, but tell me a little bit. Yeah, goosebumps.
Yeah.
Truth bumps.
I'm getting goosebumps, truth bumps right now. Fairies are elemental, etheric ancestors of ours, because we're one consciousness, right? So together we are one, but they're in a different dimension of maybe outside space and time. But there's just way too much evidence out there now to dispute the fact that maybe they're not real. They're definitely real. I mentioned earlier there was a stone circle, a crop circle like this in Clonmel in County Tipperary that was demolished by the Irish government a few weeks ago, and the whole community is freaked out because anybody who even touches one of these trees, anybody who even cuts a branch off one of these trees, they get struck with curses straight away. Most of them die within 24 hours. Something happens. They might fall. They might get a sickness. And so they're very protective over their land. And this is their land. We're mere mortals. We're here. We're checking in. We'll have a life here. We'll check out. But they're here. They're immortal. And their presence is being felt more and more now because people are opening themselves up to other energies. People are opening themselves up to the fact that this is not all there is. And as our consciousness is rising, there's people that can see them. You know, there's people that can see them all the time. When I was a child, I could see them, and I think most children do. But I think as we descend into the matrix, our connection to our higher selves, to God, to nature gets, that cord gets damaged, if not cut. And we can't see, feel, or even imagine that kind of stuff anymore, you know?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about ley lines.
Yeah.
And obviously we talked about ancestry, and you know, I'm Irish.
Yeah.
This earth incarnation.
Yeah.
What makes Ireland so powerful with the ley lines? Because you've mentioned that it's Atlantis, you've mentioned that it's Eden. How does that all play a role in a factor?
Well, Ireland is a very, or Era as it's really known, is an ancient land in the scope of Earth. So Earth expands and contracts via the ocean. So as the ocean eats up land, it can also expose land by pulling falling away. So Ireland has been around for a very long time, if not the beginning. And the same with the UK, with Scotland, Wales, and England doesn't exist. It's only a new creation. So you call that the spine of Albion. And how you know about this stuff is by how many stars are in the sky over each said location. So our story down here can be explained by what's going on in the sky. So you've got Cygnus, and you've got the spine of Albion, you've got Orion, you've got the Pleiades, you've got everything right over these lands. And this is ancient Atlantis. Atlantis sunk. It's sunk beneath the ocean. It's sunk beneath the ocean of consciousness. It's sunk in consciousness, which means we descended in consciousness. But also, the water did cover some of the land. So Ireland and the UK would have been connected. I think Ireland and Iceland was connected, because in the north of Ireland we've got the Giant's Causeway, and that's kind of shaped like an octagon. These stone pieces. We also have a Giant's Causeway in Scotland, and then I've seen the one in Iceland. So they were connected by some ancient road that they're saying was the giants built, but I don't know if they were physical. Other people say that it's natural, but they're way too symmetrical for them to be natural. So they were potentially built by druids, by giants who were probably us as well. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Were fractals moving away from source, so maybe as we did that we got smaller. You know. But I'm not sure about the Giant's Causeway, but it's there. And then off of the west coast of Ireland we have an island, a very mysterious island that appears and disappears every 7 years, called High Brazil, and that's connected to Tír na nÓg and a lot of deep esoteric, exoteric stories of Ireland's past, and it's pure magic. So Ireland is it's saturated in ancient folklore, saturated in ancient stories, saturated in biblical events, biblical prophecies. The Torah is based off the Taro and the hill of Tara in Ireland, which is where the ancient kings and druids would gather, and where kings from multi-dimensional perspectives were crowned. And it's from a different time where we can't quite understand it, because we're not where they were at in consciousness levels. But Ireland and the UK are so important. Even with the ley lines, you're heading to Skellig Michael, which is where the Michael line begins, and it makes a perfect line across Europe down through Italy, Portugal, Israel and beyond. And all of that are heavy energy ley lines, and these are the energy ley lines that give you the power and ability to speak, breathe, stand, sit, cry, live, laugh. These are the energy lines that are feeding us the energy that we're using right now to interact with each other, to think, to speak, to connect, you know?
Yeah, so, and I love that's the way you describe ley lines, because our soul's path is putting us on a mission and a journey to activate dormant parts of ourselves, and then also the earth, right? The earth is ascending with us. But you told me earlier that these lands are called Eden. Why did you say that?
Well, I've done some research in the physical. I've been brought by some other druids to places in Ireland that is called Eden. The town is called Eden. It's up. It's not far from Belfast. It's called Eden, and it's perfectly aligned with Edinburgh, which is also a biblical location, astrologically, astronomically, and physically. Over there, you've got the Rosslyn Chapel, which was built for Christ, and it houses the secrets of Christ and Christ's line. And then in Eden, in the north of Ireland, there's tons of this stuff. It's all stone circles. It's all ancient rivers that move in a certain way that carry energy through the water. And water is consciousness. Water, it carries energy. It carries memory. It carries our story. You know, it carries life. It feeds everything. Without water and the sun, we wouldn't be here. You know, so that's a deep rabbit hole. I'd need to recall a lot more that I was doing research at the time that was lining up with everything that I was finding out up there. But Atlantis, why I believe the Irish Atlantis story is because when our human or family of man split, there was wars here in Europe, and it was a war between a family, and we're all what, like, you're my brother, legitimately,
100%,
legitimately,
100%,
and everybody who's watching in this, you're my brother and sisters, legitimately. There's when you break out of the 3D consciousness that we're separate, you start to realize that we are connected, and we are all working from the mind of God right now, which is one mind, and we're all pulling information from that one mind. You don't have your own mind. You have your programming, which is a filter for the information that you're bringing through the mind of God. So the story of Atlantis was that it sunk beneath the ocean. The victors of every war are the ones who tell you the story about the war. But the war, the victors left here. They went to the Native American lands of what's known as the United States. They took different tribes who would have been on the winning side to create this new Atlantis, what they were calling it. But they also took the people that they had their victory over there as slaves. So you've got the Irish, who would be natives to Ireland, Eire, Eru, Hibernia. And you've got the blacks, who are of the Moors, who you never hear anything about the Moors anymore either, because they were conquered. So we were put into slavery over there by the French, Spanish, the Anglo-Saxon, Norman, Viking, English. And then they also took our lands and put us into colonies and stopped us from traveling all that is, and kept us under a dome of oppression and lower consciousness and forgetfulness. And we're making our way out of that right now, and we're starting to, like, you're traveling the world, right? I've been doing it myself as well, and you're just getting called to certain locations. You don't know why you're going there, but you're just doing it. And when you get there, you're seeing 555, 777. Oh, I got here on the 77 portal. You don't know why you're there, but the universe is giving you the feelings, the information, pushing you forward to keep going. And then all of a sudden you're seeing numbers on clocks, license plates on cars, your watch, your laptop, fucking the fridge, the microwave. You know, you're seeing all these things, and then you're having these deep inner knowings and feelings that none of this can be a coincidence. And there is no such thing as a coincidence when you look back at what I like to call the hallway of your life, and you look at the hallway and you see all of these toys, let's say, knocked over in this hallway, and they're all different events in your life, and somehow they all connect together, and they've brought you to where you are right now. And now you're in a place where it's all starting to make much more sense, but somehow you've no way of explaining that to people, but you can see and feel it and hear it and know it. But there's other people that are having these stories more and more now, and people are coming together, like myself and Jonah. We've done podcasts before where we talked about different things.
Yeah, let me get in on that. So here's the thing. we went live 2 years ago,
Yeah.
79 weeks. I just looked this
Right,
morning.
right.
We talked about the Illuminati.
Yeah.
We talked about the Gettys.
Yeah.
We talked about the fake moon landing set that you've been on in Hollywood,
Yeah.
where they had pedophilia rings. We talked about so many different
Disney.
topics. Disney.
Yeah.
And I want you to touch on those really quick, because I want to show where most of us were at some point during the awakening.
Yeah.
Was there was a boogeyman.
Yeah.
Everybody's out to get us. There's an elite ring. Oh my God, there's the FBI's watching me.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a surveillance truck. Oh, everybody's out to get us.
Yeah.
And you have this hyper paranoia, and then you start to wake up more and more, and you see that you created this perfect script and
Yeah.
program to let yourself know, number one, that you're important,
Yeah.
but we're all important.
Yeah.
You also, number two, that there is no boogeyman. All of
No.
these things are a projection of your consciousness.
Yeah.
And so I see how grounded you are now out here.
Yeah.
How did you get here past the paranoid timelines? Because everybody's still talking about gang stalking and
Yeah.
the elites. And
Now that's going mainstream as we're transitioning out of the gang stalking, which we were dealing with 2 years ago, and now we're transitioning into the ultimate truth, which is we are one. No matter how separate you feel or think or are paranoid to believe that you are not separate. You are a part of one God, one source. You are a fractal of that, and together we make up the mirror that is God. But we are fractalized in that mirror and can't see who we are until we put the pieces of the mirror back together and look in that mirror and get that aha moment where you realize, oh fuck, I'm God. But so are you, and so are you. And we're all brothers and sisters, and we were all broken apart. We lost our way away from each other and created separateness in our mind, or it was imprinted on us by other people. And now we're starting to realize that we are one. So there is no invasions. There is no war. The war is in our minds. And there are other beings out there that are here who are our brothers and sisters who don't want us to come back together, because they've made bigger mistakes than any of the rest of us, and they realize that if we come back together and reassemble this mirror, that they're going to be made look in that mirror, and they ain't going to like what they see when they look in the mirror at themselves from God's perspective, from God as God at themselves, and realize how far away they fell from God themselves. So it's a deep rabbit hole, but it's a perfect transition of where we are now, what we've just talked about, to how I ended up in America. And how that happened is, I was in Ireland. I'm a starseed. I'm an indigo child. I'm a Virgo. And I was born with an active third eye. And so I could see through the bullshit and the illusions. You know, somebody throw you a ball and say, go play with it in the field. And I'm like, what am I going to do with this? Go run around after it and kick it. I'm like, what? Who are we? Where are we? What's going on here? I was way more intellectual. I was deeper. I could feel more. I'm an empath. I could feel people's emotions, people's feelings, their disconnection. I couldn't believe how lost they were, how they couldn't see that this is all an illusion and that we're actually one, and that, you know, there's a lot of fantasy stories going around about who we are, what we are, why we're here, things that happened from 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, and words that prophets spoke from those periods that we've been hanging on to for so long. When I know I'm a prophet and I'm meeting prophets regularly, and we're being ignored. So I realized that, you know, I didn't believe in Christianity. I could see that they were trying to make God be a thing outside of us, and that was our consciousness. That was you, that was me, that was Jonah, and that was the camera lady's consciousness nailed to that cross. And we have been stuck on the ground here, and you could even say it's a sword with you nailed to it, and you've been stuck on the earth. And you don't know anything out of left, right, up, down, and around. And, you know, and then you could say that's closing you into a box, and you can't think outside the box, you know, the cube of Saturn. So I was awake to everything. I was awake to school, that they were trying to take us away from our imagination. They were trying to take us away from what is, they would have a different explanation for something that you look at and you can see clearly what it is, and they'll say, yeah, but nah, but really, if you look at it this way, well, this is how we look at it. And I'll be like, nah, that's definitely black. It's not. It's kind of like a dark gray. And I was like, nah, it's black.
Yeah.
It's black and white. And the starseeds, and which are just people who came here with their third eyes open, they see bullshit. They see through the illusion. They can see the wood through the trees. And I wasn't happy with these fantastical fantasy stories that I was being told about what reality was, why I can't just be anybody that I want to be. I want to be a pilot. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a fireman. Oh, it's not that simple. And then you start to realize that there's a group of people here who seem to be able to do anything they want to do. And then there's everybody else. And there's only a certain limited assortment of experiences that they're allowed to have because of another invention of man called money. And somehow this money that's made of paper, which comes from trees, that's here, is it's only you're only allowed certain parts of it. You're only allowed little bits and pieces of it. If you go here and give all your life, your time, your energy to building somebody else's dream for them, and you dedicate yourself to them and miss out on the dreams that you came here and had as a child. So I wasn't happy with any of that. So I sent myself on a journey, manifested myself on a journey to find out, well, what is the truth and who created this illusion and where can they be found? And somehow I ended up going to America. I went to Hollywood to pursue a career in music. Around the time I was being targeted by people who I believed could see that I could see through the illusions. So I kind of had to, like, the police were on top of me, the schools were on top of me, other people in my area who were elites and other witches and warlocks from my area were on top of me, and I wasn't a bad person at all. I could just see through the illusion, and I wasn't falling in with everybody else, so they made me a villain. So I decided that I was going to put an end to them. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to expose them. And around that time, I had the police on top of me, trying to blame me for things that I hadn't done. So I ended up deciding to leave Ireland and pursue a musical career, and I got invited to LA. The short and sweet version, I got invited to LA to go meet with a big producer over there who believed in me, and I left here. I went over there, and then not long after I got there, I ended up getting a job at West Coast Customs, the car modification shop that made the TV show Pimp My Ride. And then that opened us up to Hollywood, and then I worked as the right-hand man for the owner of West Coast Customs for nearly 10 years. So he would send me out to go meet with clients that were important to us, clients that helped pay the bills, clients who were from a big money background, who were working in Hollywood. Some of them were elites, some of them were actors, some of them were Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, got to meet all these people, go to their houses, not Shaq, but Kobe, and other celebrities who, why should we even mention their names? So I started to see that they were a part of a clique. And I've gone from a clique over here to now I'm seeing there's a clique over there, but it's just a bigger fantasy. And so I was seeing the same patterns, but I was seeing that they're moving around outside of the program that everybody else is living in. And I became quite close with a lot of those elites. One of them was the Disney family, and they were gang stalking me, and they tried to do a lot to me. They tried to do a lot of very heavy shit to me. They tried to kill me. They tried to pull me into different scenarios, but not into the cult, but pull me into spells. And funnily enough, while I'm talking about that, when I finally did make my way to the Rosalind Chapel in Edenbury, where Jesus and Mary are supposed to be maybe interned and maybe the Holy Grail is there, as I was walking out, the Getty's name was written on the door along with the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and a few other elite names as the people or entities who are controlling the trust. So they don't own it, they're holding it in trust for the rightful heirs. So that was interesting. But anyway, while I was in LA, I met a lot of people. A lot of crazy stuff happened. I was taken through a lot of crazy rodeos of spells, witchcraft, black magic, and stuff, because they work outside of space and time. They're from the ancient druid lines from here. They're also our brothers and sisters. And they could see that I was a seer, and they could see that I was a truth speaker, and that no matter what, I had the balls, the intelligence, and the spirit to walk in my knowing, to find the truth, expose the truth, and do my best to awaken humanity. So all of us could come back together as one consciousness, on one land, in one place, and realize that we've been held up in illusions in Hollywood, where the mountain that the Hollywood is written on is called the Wisdom Tree. Hollywood was used by the Druids to cast spells, and somehow it all connects. And I met with the grandson of Walt Disney while I was there, and he became a good friend of mine, and then he became an investor in a business that I had in London, which is where the UK crown is being held in trust by Anglo-Saxon, Norman ancestors from other lands. You know, different ethnicities are from different lands. This was our lands. Africa was for the native Africans, you know, and the Anglo-Saxon, Normans, Vikings, Swedish, Icelanders, Greenlanders, they're from the Northlands. They're the tall Nordics. You could call them the Nordic aliens, because they space invaded their way into Ireland, southern Ireland, which is not really where they were supposed to be, and they basically took over because the land where they were was not bearing fruit anymore. And maybe that's because they weren't living the right way, and maybe Source didn't like that, so Source froze them over. So they decided to leave. They're the ones that put us all into slavery, and ultimately they're the ones that colonized Earth. The Vikings colonized Earth. It started with them as the Vikings. Then they changed their names as they went along. They became the Anglos. They became the English, because English descends from Anglo. They became the Germans. They became the Phoenicians. They would like to take hats from other nations and say, I like this hat, or I like this crown, I'm going to wear it. Now we kings, Vikings, now we're the kings, not you. And they called us the Phoenicians, and that the etymology of that comes from the far kings. So we were kings over here in a land that was bountiful, magical, that kept giving, and they came from afar over here, and they took our crowns, they took our land, they took our language, which was ancient Gaelic. Is the oldest language in the world, and that is from here. And they stopped us from speaking our own language, which literally casts spells, because words cast spells. And then they landed us with the anglicized version of that language known as English, or Gaelish, because another word for the Irish was the Gaels. So in Gaelish, you're in Ireland, in Gaelland. So they used a lot of word magic. They used actual magic. They've been using real magic to keep all of us under the spell that they are the only sovereigns here when we're all sovereign. Every one of us are sovereign. But you handed your sovereignty over to them. And you said, I'm going to be a follower of yours. I'm going to give you the fruits of my labor, known as tax. And you're going to tell me how to live and how to be. And you're going to decide who I become and how far I can go in this reality. So I could go on about this stuff for a very long time. But we're getting on now.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's you're clearly a wealth of knowledge, but you got to tell the story about you crashing that car, because that's how I met you.
Yeah.
Was that's the first thing I seen on your profile.
Yeah.
What was it? A Ferrari? What tell the story about the car.
Yeah. So the Ferrari.
And did you die? Do you believe you died in a walk-in came in?
No. So while I worked at West Coast Customs, we were doing cars for celebrities. We were doing cars for rich people. And I met with a client one day. I met him at a Beverly Hills Bentley. And he was an extremely tall man. His name was Stefan. And Stefan just so happens to be from Sweden, which is where the Vikings are from. And I sold him a set of wheels for this car. It was a Ferrari Enzo. It was the last Ferrari Enzo ever made. It was donated to the Vatican to be auctioned off for children, and he bought it in the auction. That's how the story goes. That's what I was told. So I had the only set of aftermarket Enzo wheels in the world at the time. We had another client who had an Enzo. We built some wheels for him. So I told him I had these wheels, and he said, well, where are they? He said, I must have them. And I said, well, I don't know if they're for sale. I'll have to ask Ryan, the owner of West Coast Customs. So I called Ryan and I said, I've got someone who wants to buy those wheels. I'd be interested in selling them. And he said, yes. So I said, yeah, he's interested in selling them. He said, well, we have to go there now. So he took me to his house where he had two Ferrari Enzos. Around that time, it was the most expensive car in the world. It was named after the founder of Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari. So it was his namesake. It was their car that the world, it was the car of the time. So I took him, we put the wheels on the car. I'll cut a bit of the story because it'll go on, but I ended up giving him wheels for another Enzo that he had, and then I took those cars to Las Vegas and I put them in SEMA, the SEMA show. It's the largest car show in the world, and we got PR for them, and then we brought them back, and he was away in England at the time. And when I brought them back, we were hanging out a bit. One day we went for dinner in Hollywood, and after it we came home and we were just, shooting the shit in his house. And late in the night he said, let's go for a drive. And I said, yeah, let's go for a drive. So we decided to go for a drive in one of the Enzos. He had a black and a red one. And we got onto the road and we headed down towards Malibu. And we lost control and crashed at over 200 miles per hour. But that crash was the most Googled thing up until that time on the internet. It was the most Googled thing in history up until that time. And then it ended up all over the news. It turned out that he was into shady banking of all things, and it became a big story. But what's interesting about that story is when we lost control, it was dark. We crashed. We hit a pole, a telephone pole. We cut it in half, and the telephone cut the car in half, and then we skidded down the road. We should have been killed. Any other car, we would have been killed, especially at that speed. But when the car skidded to a stop, it was bright. So we crashed right at the crack of dawn. And we got out of the car. He was passed out, and he's 6'8" or something like that. He's a huge man, and I'm only 5'9", and somehow I pulled him out of the car. And neither of us remember how, but what I do remember, and an experience he shared with me when we spoke about it later, was when this car lost control, I left my body. Everything turned technicolor and electric. It was literally like being in a video game. Things were just... But in reality, it was pitch black out. And I left my body. I watched the crash from above. I had a crazy experience with God. I said goodbye to my mother. I apologized to her about how I went out. I was fully sure that that was it. And while all of this was happening, we were hitting stuff, so there was impacts. But if you've ever been knocked out or punched, that's what it felt like. The velocity of the impacts was so great that I was convinced that the next impact was going to be the last one. So I said goodbye to my family, and I thought that was it. And then I came back into my body, and then the car was skidding along the road. It was still quite dark as the car was skidding along the road, but when I opened the door, I could see the sun rising. The sun was rising. It was bright. So it turned into a supernatural event that turned into a global televised event. Obviously, they didn't know about the supernatural aspect of that feeling that I had. Turned out he had the same thing. He left his body. But I went on from there to going into business partnership with the grandson of Walt Disney, and the Disney family is highly connected to magic, as you know, with the Disney magical empire, and it also ties back to Ireland heavily, and Druidism. And then the Disneys and the Gettys are connected. The moon landing was filmed at an Air Force base in the Hollywood Hills where you couldn't even land a helicopter, called Lookout Mountain Laboratories. And how I know this is I had a client who was the daughter of J.P. Getty, who was supposedly the richest man in the world throughout all time. And she was his daughter, and he died, and now she was, let's say, part of the royalty of that lineage, and she had a manager who was like a PA for her. And he was literally like a gopher. But this man was a fucking judge in LA Superior Court, in the Children's Court of all things. And he used to pay me for cars that she would buy from me, or cars that I would repair. And her children, a couple of her children had asked me, had I ever been to John's house, who was this judge? And I said no. And they said, well, you should go there. It's very interesting. And one day, maybe a year after I had known them, he finally invited me over to the house. And I get there, and it's like, it's not a house in Beverly Hills that you would think. It was like a big industrial building. And I was like, this house doesn't fit in here. So I got out, I walked to the door, he brought me in, and I walk in, and there's white and black tiling down a long hallway. And that's checker pad or whatever, checker board, tiling. And I'm walking down this hallway, and there's small bedrooms to the left with small beds in them that look old. They look like children's beds, and they looked familiar to me because I'd been to boarding school, and that's the kind of style that these beds were when I was there as a younger child. And I walked past two of those rooms that were identical. And then I walk past another hallway that I look down, and there's like a sliding door. And you can see halfway into this room, and halfway into this room, all I can see is a massive bath made of like crystal. Not like marble, like crystal, like exotic, but huge, big. So I was like, what the fuck is that? What the fuck is this place? And I walk from there to another doorway, and I walk in, and all of a sudden I'm in like a big sound studio with a stage to the left and art hanging from the wall. And I was just walking around this place. I was like, what the fuck is this place? And I said to him, I said, what is this place? He said, I knew you were going to ask me that. He said, well, this is Lookout Mountain Laboratories. I was like, okay. And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, this is where the moon landing was filmed. And I said, come again? And he said, this is where the moon landing was filmed. And I said, so we didn't go to the moon? And before I finished with the sentence, he just shook his head and said, no, We didn't go to the moon. And I was like, okay. And then he said, this is an ex-Air Force base that was used to make governmental movies and films. And it had been around since the 50s. And that they had bought it from the military. And that they were the current owners of it. And that was pretty much it. But as I was walking around this room, this big room, kind of like a sound stage, I was walking over towards this stage, and to the left of this stage, there was a jail cell. There was a jail cell. Sorry, the battery's going dead on the phone. I'm going to have to hurry it up. There was a jail cell, like a human holding jail cell from like a prison. And that kind of freaked me out, and I realized that I was stumbling into different circles and different situations and different things around Hollywood that was making the rabbit hole go deeper. So it's, yeah, and somehow it all leads back to here. Center Point, Ireland, Atlantis, Era, Eru.
And here's the thing, everything you just described is why we woke up.
Yeah.
The moon landing set.
Yeah.
You talk about a little bit of politics we didn't get into, but we also talked about Hollywood and how none of this is real and these are the origins.
They're actors, and Freemason actors.
But the fact that our paths crossed.
Yeah.
What are the amount of, how many things had to happen? You're a life path 3. I'm a life path 6.
Yeah.
The person you can't see on camera is a life path 3 as
Rebecca.
well. So Rebecca.
Yeah.
But I say all of this to say, this is why we woke up.
Yeah.
This is what my soul led me to, a path to be here, right now at this moment with you, because this is the greatest mass awakening in world history.
It is. Yeah.
And we're definitely going to have to go live and tell a little bit more of your story, because we haven't done that in a couple years.
Yeah.
I want to update people on you guys' life together and what you're discovering.
Yeah.
And I also want to say thank you
Thank you
for bringing me out here, because, man, just to be out here in this nature is otherworldly. So, my brother,
thank you, bro.
thank you, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, man.
And welcome to Ireland.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody watching this is starting to wake up and realize that we are one. We are one. All of us. There's no skin color. There's no race. There's no separation. There never was. It was always an illusion. And we are coming back together. The fractals are making their way back to source. And we are there. We're almost there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.